I believe that the reason for being there, first of all, we're all lied to when we're told that we're going there for weapons of mass destruction, and when we're going there because of links between Saddam Hussein and terrorism and things like that. It was all just a justification to go there and take the oil out of Iraq.
Okay, that's what he thinks, but that soldier is now refusing to go back and fight in Iraq, calling the war unjust. 28-year-old Staff Sergeant Camilo Majia was deployed to Iraq with his Florida National Guard unit last April, returning to Miami on leave this past October. He was supposed to return to his Florida base later that month. He didn't. Majia went AWOL until today when he turned himself in. With his parents at his side, Majia said he's now seeking conscientious objector status. So what is conscientious objector status? Well, the Army defines it as a firm, fixed, and sincere objection to participation in war in any form or the bearing of arms because of religious training and belief. But since he didn't have those convictions when he signed up, can he just refuse to go back? And what about going AWOL? Now joined by Stephen Collier, an attorney for the Military Law Task Force. He represented another serviceman who sought the same status. And Todd Weiler. He served in the Clinton administration as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Army. Thank you both for coming on the program. Mr. Collier, how does this work? Can you just change your mind after enlisting and decide that you are opposed to serving?
Yes, you can. The regulations recognize that soldiers do develop firm, fixed objections to war during their service, and actually recognizes that if you had those firm, fixed beliefs before you enlisted, that you would not be eligible for conscientious objector status. So conscientious objectors, by definition, are only people who develop those beliefs after they have enlisted.
Do you get to choose which war you don't like? Meaning, don't you have to be opposed to war in general as opposed to opposed to a particular war?
Correct. But, and Staff Sergeant Majia clearly made statements that he opposes this war, but the fact that he opposes this war alone isn't grounds to disqualify him if he in fact opposes war in all situations.
Well, I would think it would actually be an argument against him because he's making it clear that, you know, it's this war in particular that bothers him. Let me play a piece of sound from a Staff Sergeant Majia talking about why.
I didn't see any reconstruction. I saw that people were being killed. I saw that the reasons that we presented to the world for going to war turned out to be all unfundamented, you know, like the weapons of mass destruction. Already the top inspector said that there are no weapons and we're still there. Already they have said that there's no link between Saddam Hussein and terrorism and we're still there. So why are we there? Why are we there? I don't have a purpose. I don't have a reason to be there.
Mr. Weiler, look, I understand conscientious objector status. I'll go through the steps that it takes to get that in a moment. But, you know, I'm troubled by a soldier just sort of deciding that he doesn't like this particular war and saying, you know what, all right, I'm going to go AWOL and I'm going to become a conscientious objector.
I'm very concerned about that too, and I'm concerned about some of the accusations that Sergeant Majia has made against his command. Apparently he has made some very strong statements that the command put soldiers in harm's way needlessly, that they were seeking out hunting for medals. If that is the case, then Sergeant Majia had a responsibility to report that to the command, to the IG, and allow for an investigation, not to return home and try to get an administrative out as a permanent resident. He thought he was allowed to leave the Army after 8 years, and then when that didn't go through, then to just go AWOL and now come back and be a conscientious objector. He had a responsibility there to the soldiers that he led as a non-commissioned officer, and he failed in that responsibility.
Mr. Collier, aren't you disturbed about his comments publicly? I mean, I'm not saying whether you're opposed to the war or support the war. Nothing to do with my question. I'm asking you whether that using that as his reason for wanting out, does that trouble you?
Well, as I said before, he has to have an objection to war in all forms, but merely the fact that he also has particular objections to this war does not mean he doesn't object to war in all forms. And clearly, he has made statements, or at least I've seen reported statements that he's made, that he said there's no excuse for any war. So I think, although he is talking about his comments in this realm, it doesn't exclude that he objects to war in all forms. And until he's asked that and answers that, we don't know.
Let me go through the steps to obtain objector status. Fill out an application. interview with a chaplain, interview with a psychiatrist or a medical officer. You get a hearing with an investigating officer. A unit commander reviews the application, and then there's a decision by a presiding authority. Mr. Weiler, I was surprised by how many people are actually granted this status. It's about half the people who apply, it seems.
Sure, and I think particularly in a voluntary force like today, the Army is being very good about this in processing these applications, and it's really disturbing to see someone trying to take advantage of this situation, as I think Sergeant Majia is doing. And you made a comment about whether you oppose or favor the action in Iraq. It's really irrelevant in this case, and I hope that the people that do oppose that action do not take this sergeant and make him a spokesperson for that cause, because it really does harm to that cause.
Yeah, see, it seems to me, Mr. Collier, if what he's doing is trying to get conscientious objector status, he should be going out and saying, look, I oppose all wars, as you point out. I think once he starts going out and saying, I oppose this war, he's undermining his own credibility. And he's basically becoming a spokesperson for the anti-war movement, which he has every right to do. He just doesn't have the right to do it and also say, I'm not going to go back after I've signed up.
Well, I think we shouldn't prejudge him. We don't know all the facts. And
it seems suspicious, though, doesn't it? I mean, well, it really does.
Yeah, and of course, I wasn't there when he made his statements, and who knows what the media is covering in those statements tend to be maybe the most inflammatory statements he's making, and maybe he's also making statements that says he objects to war in all forms. But we don't know. Clearly, his application will ask him that, and his application will have to make a compelling argument that he does object to war in all forms.
I don't know, Mr. Weiler, I listened to both those statements we just played, and I think it's pretty tough to explain how you make both of those particular statements and suggest that you're talking about all wars, you know, and particularly when it comes to AWOL. I mean, what's the rule with regard to that, Mr. Weiler?
Well, he left his unit without permission, and over a period of time you actually become a deserter. I'm not sure that the Army is going to pursue that route, but certainly I would assume that the Army would seek prosecution in this case in terms of a court-martial, and Sergeant Majia could be facing some time here. Again, I'm not going to try to get into his mind. I was in the first Gulf War, and there's a lot of thoughts that go through your mind, but this soldier had a responsibility not only to the Army, but to the troops that he was leading. And if he truly felt some of the things that he has stated, then he had an obligation to take that forward and proceed in the right manner here, not just when you don't get what you want, you just flee, and now he's having second thoughts about that.
Todd Weiler, Stephen Collier, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up.